Trigun Stampede is probably one of the highlights of 2023 for me, at least when it comes to anime. Its story resonated with me and I was stuck thinking about its characters and the world they inhabit long after I finished it. One of the things I've thought the most about would probably have to be a specific scene with Meryl that happened in the 7th episode. To give you all a little refresher, this is the episode where Wolfwood's boyfriend falls off the ship the gang was on, and where the blue-haired guy directs the said ship onto the orphanage Wolfwood grew up in, and activates the ion cannon. The gang decides to stop the ship and the giant ion cannon, except Roberto, who is against the idea and wants to escape. Meryl is tasked with activating the cannon after Vash and Wolfwood manually turn it away. Now we arrive at the part I have a problem with. Roberto and Meryl get into a confrontation because Roberto does not believe that they can turn the giant spaceship-sized cannon and stop the ship in time. So he wants to do what he has been doing until this point, that is, keeping both himself and Meryl safe. Meryl, however, decides to stand up for herself and stick with the plan despite Roberto's protest. Now, why do I have a problem with this scene? My reason is Meryl's reason for going through with the plan. That reason being what happened in the 3rd episode of the show, where a million knives destroys the town our 3 main characters have spent the first 2 episodes in. Meryl states that the guilt of what happened to the town and the kid as her motivation for going through with the plan. Slight tangent. Until I started writing this script, I thought that the kid was named Antonis, but as it turns out his name is Tonis. Anyway, tangent over. And honestly, I could believe it. During the attack, when Meryl found Tonis hiding, and after knives started destroying the town, she witnessed the kid fall to his demise in front of her. Something like that would definitely stick with a person. So in terms of believability, I'm completely sold on Meryl's trauma. It is a good and believable motivation. So why do I still dislike it? It is because we haven't seen her being particularly distraught by what happened. The only time we saw her reflect on what happened was when she witnessed the aftermath of the attack. But she wasn't even the main focus of the scene, Vash was. The underlying issue with this scene for me is that it has never been hinted at until this point that what happened to the town affected her in any major way. You could try to make an argument that it only makes sense that something like that would drastically impact someone, which is true, but I would argue that we still need to see that for it to be believable, since this was her driving motivation in the scene, and to me at least, it feels kind of cheap that her whole motivation ends up feeling this shallow. I understand why writers would make this her motivation, because this was a big moment in the show, so she needed a good reason to go through with Vash's plan to stop the ship, which, if I'm being completely honest, I think that this was a pretty great motivation. What irks me about it is that this is the first time it was introduced. So if I had to fix it, how would I do it? I'll be honest, I thought about this for some time and I just couldn't think of anything. The first thing I could come up with was to replace her motivation with something else, but that just didn't feel right. It was too good of a motivation to be cut out. Then I thought, maybe they should have added a scene in one of the previous episodes where she talks with Roberto about how what happened to the town has affected her, which would improve this scene drastically in my opinion, because it would give us as viewers more insight into how she feels about the whole town incident and what happened to Tonis, which would make us sympathize with her more. Not only that, but it could serve to make Roberto more empathetic towards her goal as well, which would make him giving in much more impactful. While I was talking to my brother about this, he mentioned that instead of her discussing this with Roberto, it would be a better idea for her to discuss this with Vash, since they are both affected by the same event, which could make them feel closer to one another in a platonic sense. And it would make her motivation more layered, since now she isn't doing this just because of her trauma, but because she believes in her friend. While I like both my and my brother's idea, I lean more towards mine because it's mine and I'm always correct. But also because then we can still use her "I'm doing this for me" line. Now, I'm no writer, I'm just a guy who's been thinking about this scene for 2 years now, so I am willing to accept that I might have misunderstood something about the original scene or her motivation. So feel free to make your opinion known in the comments, and while you're there, tell me if you've preferred my or my brother's idea.